Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the 5th edition of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences Healthy Cities series. My name is Pauline Rankin, and I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Carlton, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening. Our faculty's aspiration for this Healthy Cities series is to explore many factors related to how we can contribute to urban centers being healthy, both today and in the future. And tonight's panel, entitled Building Community Through Creativity, brings together artists, activists, cultural workers, and academics to focus on the power of art and creativity and as it shapes our shared spaces. The brilliant poet and one of our panelists tonight, Jamaal Jackson Rogers, has written, quote, "Art is a universal language spoken through the unique perspectives of the senses. No matter the ages, stages, and phases, the mystery and science of the human experience is best encapsulated and testified through artistic expression," end quote. I couldn't agree more with that sentiment, and I definitely couldn't have said it better. Tonight, our panel will share their experiences and insights into how individuals and organizations can center the work of artists in serving people and strengthening communities. Now, originally, this event was to be held last April, you'll remember last April, at the Carlton Dominion Chalmers Centre, our downtown arts performance and learning center. It is and would have been a particularly appropriate venue for the forthcoming discussion. And while it's unfortunate that we aren't there this evening, I want to thank the panelists for their genuine flexibility, for still agreeing to take part in this virtual conversation months later. I'd like to thank our FASS team before we start for their labor and their creativity in bringing us together tonight. You know who you are, the dream team from the Office of the Dean of FASS. And to the audience, we're so delighted to have you join us here for this discussion. And now I'll turn it over to the truly amazing director of the Carleton University Art Gallery, Sandra Dyck, who will offer a land acknowledgement and moderate our discussion this evening. Over to you, Sandra.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pauline. Thank you for your kind words. And thank you to you and your colleagues for inviting me to shape and moderate this conversation. So I just wanted to thank Ann Bowker, Nick Ward, Emma Fraser, and Ainsley Coghill, whose collective work has made tonight's event possible. So I also want to thank everyone for joining tonight and for choosing some time to spend with us this evening. So I know the Zoom landscape is cluttered and competitive, and there's lots of things competing for your time. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm really happy to be bringing together 5 wonderful speakers who have kindly and generously agreed to share their experiences and ideas. So I welcome and thank Mara Brown, Jamaal Jackson Rogers, Danny Printup, Ellen Waterman, and Melanie Hugo. So the title of tonight's conversation is Building Community Through Creativity, a term encompassing the dynamic practices of our panelists, be they visual art, education, performance, music, advocacy, poetry, spoken word, capacity building, mentorship, songwriting, entrepreneurship, community organizing, and the list goes on. When I think about the process of building something, a project, an event, a physical or virtual space, I often look to the renowned artist and art educator, Pablo Helguera. We build, he says, because we seek to reach out to others, and others will come initially because they recognize themselves in what we have built. After this initial encounter, he observes, spaces start a process of self-identification, ownership, and evolution based on group interests and ideas. These are not static spaces at which static viewers or audiences arrive, he says, but are communities that evolve and grow. The process of building described by Helguera is active, relational, and nonlinear. It is shaped with and for others in response to and in service of them. It is exciting, experimental, and deeply fulfilling work grounded in the work of artists. So my goal for this evening is to provide a platform for each panelist to present the important community building and world building work they're doing in Ottawa, and to encourage the exchange of ideas between them and with you. So after each panelist talks about an organization or project near and dear to their heart, I'm going to ask them a few questions and then open up the floor for your questions. We can't, however, talk about the city of Ottawa without talking about its location on the traditional and unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. So I live and work in this city and on this land as an uninvited guest. And it is important for me to acknowledge my commitment personally and on behalf of Carleton University Art Gallery, where I work, to an evolving process of personal and organizational learning, accountability, and responsibility. This is grounded in relationships built on reciprocity and respect. It is anchored in specific actions, and its goal is a more just and equitable society. So I'll start now by introducing the panelists. And I thought rather than reading out each person's impressive biography, which you can find on the information page for this event and on many other places online, I decided to ask them to introduce themselves. And in keeping with this event's focus on the city, I've asked them to speak to their history with and relationship to Ottawa. So basically, when did they come to Ottawa? Why did they come to Ottawa? Where did they live before coming here? Where do they work now? And what is that work? So first up is Melanie Hugo. Are you there, Melanie?
Mute, technical difficulties. Will we be introducing ourselves first and others introducing themselves, or should we just jump into our presentation?
No, I will introduce you each, and I'll ask you to introduce yourselves each in turn, and then we'll do presentations.
Okay, okay. We'll show the slides later then as well, if that's okay. Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Melanie Hugo. I'm a Filipino-Canadian cultural worker, educator, artist based here in Ottawa. I came to Ottawa in 2003. Actually, it was for a job as a health researcher. My training is actually in the social sciences, in psychology and sociology, and it brought me here to Ottawa fresh out of university. And my partner was also here because Jason Pelche, because his background is in public policy. And I co-ran with him the art and music space Possible Worlds. And aside from that, I'm a socially engaged artist working with different communities in Ottawa. And I also have a day job advising on culture and diplomacy. And thank you, Sandra.
You're not busy at all.
No. But I'm so honored to be part of this panel. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Oh, thank you for joining. Danny, can I see
hello
you?
Oh, hi. Hello, Skanoke Kwekwe. My name is Danny. I'm from Kitigan Zibi, Anishinaabeg. So in a way, I've been connected to this territory since time immemorial. And I'll always have a permanent connection here, no matter where I live. And I lived in Ottawa off and on throughout different periods of my life. I spent a large part of my life living in Fort Erie, which is a town closer to my mom's community. But I've settled here more permanently since 2014. I came back to, try and do arts and cultural work, and I've been keeping busy doing that since, pretty much. I've worked in different capacities at Saw Gallery, the Indigenous Arts Center, the City of Ottawa's Public Art Program, and I've done some independent curatorial work as well. Currently, I work at CUAG as the programs assistant, and I do a lot of different things in that role. I help with some of our more ambitious programming. I do curation, exhibition tours, and some independent projects, which I'm excited to share with you today.
Thank you, Danny. Mara?
Good evening, everyone. So happy to be here, and thank you, Sandra, and to all. My name is Mara Brown, and I've met some amazing people and seen some phenomenal impact through community arts and arts education programming, most often working in the areas of music and dance, and in both urban and rural communities. Directly prior to moving to Ottawa, I was working with Tafu Music Baroque Orchestra and Chamber Choir. And I moved to Ottawa actually just in April of 2019, specifically to start my current role as the director of Carlton Dominion Chalmers Centre.
The inaugural director. Congratulations, it's wonderful. All right, Ellen.
Hi, it's great to be here, and thanks very much, Sandra, for your exquisite organizing of this event. So I'm Ellen Waterman. I'm a musician and a music prof here at Carleton University. And before moving to Ottawa in 2019, I taught at Memorial University in St. John's, Newfoundland for about a decade. And the very close ties between the university and the community music scenes in St. John's really helped kind of shape my ideas about the role of university music programs in their cities. So at Memorial, the School of Music is both a post-secondary music program, but it's also a hive of activity for community music making, from traditional fiddlers to music festivals to programs for young children. There's like 24/7, 7 days a week. And that's partly because the school is just one of the very few physical resources with pianos, sound technology, and acoustically good rooms for music in the city. It's a relatively small city of about 200,000 people, right? So people in St. John's think of the School of Music as theirs. And although the space and the services are rented, the rates are governed by that historical relationship. St. John's simply can't afford a division between town and gown, and this fosters a climate of collaboration and cooperation that benefits everybody. So that sounds a bit speechy, but I really, when you asked me that question, I really thought, how is it that cities that you come from affect the relationship to the city that you come to? So what brought me to the big city of Ottawa is the opportunity to take up the Helmut Coleman Chair for Music in Canada. It's a research chair endowed by Carleton Professor Emerita Dr. Elaine Keeler, who devoted her career to making connections among musical communities here in Ottawa and across Canada. A distinguished pianist and musicologist, the indefatigable Dr. Keeler inspires me by her current intensive program of work, which includes teaching piano and music theory to young people of all ages and stages in her neighborhood, right? So this incredible sense of connection. So as Coleman Chair, my mandate is to develop a new research center here in the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Music, Sound, and Society in Canada. It'll be a research center dedicated to exploring the complex and diverse roles that music and sonic arts play in shaping Canadian society. And the center is committed to community-engaged scholarship and research creation for social transformation. So it's just a huge adventure, and I'm really, really enjoying learning about my new city of Ottawa.
Congratulations, Ellen. It's been wonderful having you at Carleton and starting to get to know you and work with you. So welcome. Jamal?
Greetings. Thank you for having me this evening. I hope everybody's in good spirits and healthy. So my name is Jamal Jackson Rogers. I have a stage name that I go by and that people may recognize. If you see me do my live performances, just Jamal the Poet. I'm born in Toronto, Scarborough. I was raised in Guyana in South America, and then I settled here in Ottawa at 9 years old. I'm a poet, songwriter, and an arts educator, and also the director and co-founder of the Origin Arts and Community Center here in Hintonburg community. I came to, my father decided to raise me in his home country to give me some of the culture that the Caribbean has and infuse that with Canadian identity. And when I came to Ottawa, it was my father's plan to look for a better living and lifestyle for his children. So yeah, I've been doing most of my studies here. I studied early childhood education, child and youth worker, and also developmental services, and also child studies. Those were my predominantly post-secondary studies, but I've also been an avid art enthusiast and practitioner since I was a young child, actually, as a writer, as a poet, and as a songwriter. And so now I perform, I write poetry, I run and organize the programming for the Origin Arts and Community Center, and also the Black Rhino Artistic Retreat, which is a venture that I am very close to completing, but an artistic retreat for citizens in Ottawa.
So you're also not very busy.
No, you know, what's busy is relative, right? So relatively speaking, yeah, I'm busy, but I'm trying to manage that. It's not, you know, it's trying to make it more balanced.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jamal.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we'll start with our presentations, and Melanie is up first. So what we're going to do is each of the panelists, it has sent slides, and Emma Fraser is going to share her screen and run the slides while each of our panelists speaks. So Melanie, please take it away.
Great, thanks, Sandra. And Emma, do you mind backing it up? Maybe, I think it's 3 or 4 slides, just so we can get an overview of what the space looks like from the front. If not, we can always go back to it. Okay, well, while we're waiting, I can, oh, okay, great. Oh, okay, we can, yeah, that's no problem. We can go through the slides as they'll just loop as I present, but yeah, so the project or the organization or collective I'm going to talk about is Possible Worlds. And I co-run the space with my partner, Jason Pelche. Possible Worlds really is a response to creating a space in the city that we didn't yet see, an alternative art and music space where we could bring people together, this really welcoming community hub where anyone could learn, share, and connect. And also we wanted to advance graphic art and electronic music practices and alternative models to arts engagement that we wanted to build these communities that we didn't see yet in Ottawa. So we started this space in 2015 in Chinatown, originally as a pop-up. And we started it sort of like this idea of, okay, we're gonna do it for a year and we'll see how it goes, and that'll be that. And 4 or 5 years later, here we are. The response to the community was so great that we decided to keep doing it year after year. We're happy to say that we've moved from a 330 square foot space in Chinatown into a larger street level wheelchair accessible space in Hintonburg as of last month. So please come visit if you get a chance. And we have, COVID requirements in place, but a little bit more about what we do at the space. Okay. Okay, so what we do at the space. So as I mentioned, we specialize in art and music, but specifically graphic art, print, and electronic music. And we like to explore different ways of engaging the public through, be it not just consuming, which I think a lot of people recognize us for, so buying objects in our retail space, but also presenting artworks from underrepresented, emerging, or experimental artists, creating learning opportunities, whether it's through workshops, through internship programs, creating publishing editions with artists. So we have a print studio in the back where we collaborate with artists to create, whether it's prints, artist books, zines, cassettes, objects that are artist editions and that can be shared and disseminated widely. The other thing we do is at the core of our work really is to generate meaningful connections between artists, as well as for us to sort of create networks and a hub really in Ottawa for people to come together, to share their ideas, to learn about new things happening in the city and beyond. And yeah, just to be able to experiment without being intimidated or feeling like, it's a space just for artists. We want the public to come in as well. And some of the ways that we've done this is whether it's through a space for artists to exhibit their work, providing different opportunities for not just artists, but culture workers to develop their careers, generating income for artists through artist fees or the presentation of their work, and just really inspiring projects and ideas in contemporary graphic art and electronic music. I'm going to leave it at that for now, because I think Sandra's going to ask me some questions later about sort of our vision and the way we approach things. And I can answer more questions later.
I'm actually going to ask you a few questions now, if that's okay.
Oh, you are? Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I better get ready.
And this wasn't a question I had planned to ask you, but it was interesting to me that you just emphasized just now that one of the most important things that you do is create meaningful connections between artists. And often we think about like an organization being a public facing organization and serving the public, however we might understand that. Can you talk a little bit more about how you see the role of, or the importance of creating connections between artists and how you do that and what you feel that the impact is for your organization?
Yeah, I think it really comes from sort of me and Jason's background in the social sciences. I have a background in sociology and psychology. He has a background in public policy. So for us, we actually don't have sort of formal art training backgrounds. So for us, we've always centered relationships and connections first, and trying to balance that also with artistic production and creation, as sort of not in competition with one another, but sort of serving each other. And the idea that, you know, citizens can participate in creating culture. It's not just something, you know, reserved just for artists or for certain groups. That has also guided us as well. I think one thing really for us too is we've chatted about it too, Sandra, this idea of sort of having a physical space in a time of, you know, when digital is sort of, you know, a lot of people ask us, oh, why have you, you know, opened a space like this when, you know, you can do a lot of stuff digitally. And for us, it's really important to have that space to foster connections. We've intentionally kept the space small so that we remain sustainable, but also we find that by having a space that's smaller, we can foster these intimate connections between different community members from different backgrounds. And then it's not just in the space itself, but we also go outside the community. So our roots are in creating gatherings, sort of ad hoc gatherings in bars, in community centers. It was called Spins and Needles, where we combine sort of DIY art projects, art and craft projects with DJs, and anyone could come and create something. So for us, going into the community, serving community members where they're at, meeting them there, but also creating spaces for people to meet and have meaningful connections is something that's really dear to our work.
I mean, on the question of models, I mean, I noticed on your website, you talked about reimagining traditional models through which the public can engage with culture. And you mentioned record shops and print shops as inspirational models for what you wanted to do with Possible Worlds. And I was wondering if you could talk about why these particular models inspire you and what is their potential to offer different forms of engagement?
Yeah, so record shops and print shops are sort of the ways that Jason and I have accessed culture. We've traveled a lot. I mean, even as a kid growing up, I was born in Toronto, raised in Mississauga, and sort of, you know, coming from a Filipino background, there were lots of community events and, you know, lots of food, lots of language sharing, just, you know, that sort of has stayed with me throughout my cultural career. And then, you know, it's sort of strange to go into, at a later age, to go into museums or theaters and sort of be passive consumers or observers of culture. And, you know, as I grew older and we started going into record shops and print shops, we could sort of see the potential of, you know, record shops were sort of this community hub where people can go to for information about what's going on at the grassroots, at the ground level. You can really get the pulse of the city, you know, by picking up a flyer, by, you know, asking the people who work there what's going on. And when we've traveled to different cities, that's often the first place we'll go to is a record shop. So we can sort of see, okay, what's happening and how can we sort of understand the cultural scene better. For print shops, there's printing equipment can be very expensive. So this idea again of a community hub where you're sharing equipment, you're sharing knowledge, you're sharing techniques, people can come in and take workshops. And there's a lot of learning involved in those sorts of spaces. You can get dirty, you can, it's a production space as well. So for us, those two models where you can see production, creation, and consumption in these venues is something that we wanted to blend together when we put Possible Worlds together. So yeah.
Okay, I have one final question for you, Melanie, which we've already talked a little bit about, but you mentioned on your website that you talk with Possible Worlds about wanting to create alternative culture. And I was interested to know what you think of as alternative, because it also kind of begs the question, like, alternative to what?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, alternative sort of, I guess it's sort of a word we use in the art world for labeling things that are outside mainstream society. And, I use that too as a word to sort of describe things that may not be happening in institutions or spaces that we don't yet see. So with Possible Worlds, we've used that word. We've also used that word with other interventions we've done in the past, like Spins and Needles or other installations, or some of my work that I do as a socially engaged print artist with different community members. But I guess alternative comes from a question of who are we not seeing participate in creating our cultures? Who gets to define what we get to experience, culture, participate in culture? What are we not seeing existing in the world? So, things like, our current art world is, arguably sort of individually centered. It's about these grand narratives. This idea of, seeing only culture in a white box or in an institution. Whereas for us, I've always seen, and Jason does as well, that culture sort of happens not just in those spaces, but outside those spaces as well. For us, it's not just led by a single individual. It can be by a duo, by a collective, by many people. Culture is not just, culture isn't just one thing or an object. If you think about it, culture is really, it's a shared experience. It's language, it's symbols, it's religion. So why can't the way we do art be like that as well, where we're sharing and learning from one another? And yeah, it shouldn't be in an institution. For us, it should be part of everyday life. You should be able to go into your neighborhood and see culture at work, whether it's a mural or, a space like ours, you can just go in and find out what's happening. So I guess that's what we mean by alternative, is that there are things in the world that we don't yet see, and many of our initiatives are based on that. But as I mentioned, in our pre-talk with the other panelists, my thinking has changed a lot over the years, and I'm sort of exploring right now this idea of, it's from a Dutch researcher, artist practitioner too, on this idea of something called the also space. So maybe not framing the spaces we create as alternative, but more as also. So seeing ourselves as part of our communities, as part of working in collaboration with institutions, so that we can see the things that we want to see in the world exist, not in opposition, but working with the people that we sort of want to change their hearts and minds. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Melanie. Okay, Danny, I think you're up next. And so as Danny mentioned, she is the programs assistant at Carleton University Art Gallery, which is what we call CUAG, just in case you don't know, CUAG, CUAG. So Danny, please take it away. Oh, I should say Danny's going to be speaking about a few workshops that she has organized at the gallery.
Yes, for my project, I wanted to highlight a series of art-based workshops that I designed and facilitated with different Indigenous community service organizations that corresponded to CUAG's exhibitions. For this first workshop that you can see, I invited Nico Williams, who is an Anishinaabe artist that lives in Montreal. And he came to Ottawa to do a quill making workshop with a group of women at Tweegan Housing. And Tweegan is a transitional home for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis women here in Ottawa. Fortunately, the quills didn't arrive on time, but we were able to use beads instead. And Nico facilitated in making beaded keychains. And, you know, as you can see here, we're not in the gallery, we're actually at their space. And we were very gracious that they could host us there. We brought all the supplies, lots of yummy food, the talent. Nico is an incredible artist and amazing facilitator. And we spent a lovely afternoon together learning how to make beaded keychains. And even though, you know, we were off site, we were in a space that is familiar and comfortable to them. So it's great that we can be mobile that way. Emma, if you want to switch slides. Thank you. This workshop was with the lovely elders group from the Ottawa Native Friendship Center. And this corresponded to the Christy Belcourt exhibition, which I'm sure many of you remember. We had many different types of engagement around that show, one of which was a tea making workshop that I created. If you just want to go to the next slide. Thank you. And when I was researching Christy Belcourt's practice, you know, her visual art and community practice, I was inspired by how Indigenous peoples have always used plants and have always used flowers to live and thrive here on our homelands. And for this workshop, I sourced various teas and dried flowers from a couple different places, and then went on to research their individual properties, you know, so that we could all learn together and create, you know, our own tea variations and learn about the special qualities, you know, of each plant and each flower. And, you know, then we have these little teas that we can go home and enjoy. And for me, this workshop was really in line with what Christy's work explores. You know, in particular, how she spent so much time on the land, you know, and with elders who have that specialized knowledge. And, you know, for myself, you know, as an Indigenous person, when I started learning about Christy's work, you know, I saw that knowledge that I didn't have, you know, those connections to land and connections to elders who are knowledgeable in that way. And that can be a difficult experience, you know, to grapple with. And I think Christy is aware of that. And maybe that's part of the reason why her work is so aesthetically, you know, beautiful. It's very calming and very soothing to look at. And, you know, so I think about these things, you know, when creating workshops and, you know, wanting to create a workshop that's, you know, inviting to Indigenous peoples when they're in our space. And, you know, I also wanted to do something that was fun and interesting and corresponded to the show and reference those knowledge in a more restorative way. So if you just want to go to the next slide. In addition to the elders group, we also had the group from Tweegan come and see the exhibition, and we made more teas together as well. And we did this in the evening, you know, which was really nice to have that space to ourselves where no one was in the gallery. And it was great that, you know, we could go off site to their space, but that we could invite them back to come and do this workshop with us too. So next slide. This workshop was with the Anishinaabe ASCII youth delegation that came to Carlton. And some of them were from fly-in communities in Northern Ontario. And this was while the Marlene Creets exhibition was on. And her work really explores human experience, memory, and the land. And I created this tote bag making workshop where we could, all think about where we're from. And I called the workshop Carrying Community. And I based it on how, as Indigenous peoples, we carry our communities wherever we go. And that's a very complex negotiation. And I can imagine even more so, when you're from a fly-in and you're at that age where you're thinking about leaving your community and potentially going to post-secondary. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is one of the tote bags, and Margaret, who made that bag, told me that it's referencing her time with her grandfather and being on the water with him, and all of the interconnectivity that can happen in a canoe, which I think is very beautiful and shows the conceptual and emotional spaces that can be opened up through art-based learning. And I think for me and the work that I do, building community through creativity means thinking from my perspective as an Indigenous person and being influenced by contemporary forms of art making and designing activities that allow for, us as Indigenous peoples from different nations to come together in these instances and make new ideas with each other. So thank you, Emma, for going through the slides.
Thank you so much, Danny. I thought maybe I would just ask you to talk a little bit about some of the parts of your process that you go through in developing these workshops.
So yes, as I mentioned, I create, from an Indigenous perspective, and I'm Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe, so I draw upon that lived experience. I've also accessed care through many social, cultural programs throughout my whole life. And, I definitely bring that to my process as well. And, from that perspective, art and education don't exist as separate things. A lot of our, diverse learnings happen through the processes of art making, which is often a collaborative practice. And so I draw upon my experience with those learning styles and try to incorporate those elements of art-based learning that I'm familiar with. So thinking about open-endedness, deep observation, making time for space for reflection, and also, which I think is important, is the inclusion of personal experience and narrative that's built into the activity. For the Carrying Community workshop, I talked about where I'm from and how what I designed, related to what I'm connected to and my relationship to community. And I think it's that inclusion of narrative and story, which is inherent to Indigenous way of doing things, that really allows me to connect with the participants. And, the workshop, just doesn't center the product outcome. The teas turned out really amazing. I still, enjoy them to this day. But I see the context in which those teas were made as being, just as special.
Thank you. In terms of your own thinking about these workshops, how would you say that they're different than the kinds of activities that the groups might be organizing for themselves in their own programming?
Well, before inviting them into their space, I would have conversations, about the kinds of things that they're doing. And then, I want to go do those things with them. They, in each of their own programs, they do a lot of amazing things on their own. I guess what's different about, them being at CUAG is, they're happening alongside contemporary art making. And, so when they come in and we have this workshop and this space with each other, there's a dialogue between the combination of knowledges that are existing in that space, the combinations of learning and doing. And I see that gathering as being very distinct. And really what I do in design, stems from my own interest in art history and Indigenous scholarship, contemporary visual art. And I draw upon, those knowledges as well. And I use them, with my own understanding and ways of being as an Indigenous person. And then I tailor build, I create something that is relative to the environment of CUAG, but, also relational to the community as well. And I think it's the combination of those things, from my own research and my own interest in visual art, that would separate them too as being distinct, but I actually try to make them quite similar, in terms of structure, approach, vibe. I think about the kinds of workshops that I experienced in those cultural spaces.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'll just ask you one last question. I know just from working with you that you are very passionate about creating spaces of belonging. And about trying to think about how art galleries can be spaces of belonging. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. What do you mean by this term, and how you think that art galleries could function in this way?
Yes, I think I'm always thinking about that, and how I think about that will consistently, change as, as a cultural practitioner. As Indigenous peoples, we occupy a different space because of the diversity of our experiences, histories, worldviews, cultures, value systems, which is why we continue to need to build our own spaces, so that we can feel connected to each other and connected to something larger. An example of this would be when you go to, a powwow ground and you go the week before the powwow, there's nothing there, and then you see it during a powwow, and that clearing, that space has completely transformed into a space for everyone. Elders, super energetic kids, teenagers, mothers, everyone can be there. There are signs, ramps, stairs, movable seating, a quiet, sacred space to the side if that's something that you need. Everyone was thought of in its conception before it was even built. So for me, there are these incredible Indigenous spaces of belongings that have a very, profound purpose. And those are things that we create for ourselves. And it's so important because in these spaces, we can be the fullest version of ourselves that we might not be able to be, in our day-to-day. And I draw upon how I feel in those spaces, so that I can, create, in my role, more public spaces where Indigenous people can feel like they belong. And, historically, there wasn't room for Indigenous experience in the gallery space. And, that's still very much the case. But as more galleries continue their efforts to unlearn, respond, and make room, the more I think that they can function as spaces of belonging. Personally, I've connected to many amazing artists, curators, thinkers in gallery spaces over the years. And, some of what they have shared, via their art, their performance, their, discussion of their work is still with me. And, it's in gallery spaces that I've researched and dialogued with Indigenous concepts. And, just during my time at CUAG, I've developed, workshops, but more importantly, I've developed relationships with members from Indigenous communities. So I do think that the gallery can be a meaningful space for Indigenous peoples, to connect and to belong, spaces where we can gather and make things together. Because I think that the more that we do that, the more that we are able to explore, deeper thoughts, and then create new ideas and new meanings for ourselves.
Thank you so much, Dani. It's truly wonderful to work with you, and I learned so much from you. And thank you so much for all the care and thought that you put into the work that you do at CUAG. I'm feeling emotional.
Oh, me quite, Sandra. That's so thoughtful. Thank you.
Okay, Mara Brown, please take it away.
Well, thank you very much. This evening, I decided to focus actually on CDCC itself. So my current home, Carlton Dominion Chalmers Centre, It was actually acquired in 2018 with the specific vision to connect with the broader community and to serve as an arts, performance, and learning center. You know, I was so fortunate to be able to meet with hundreds of people during the first year in the building. And outreach was really key to start to identify some of the existing strengths and challenges. At CDCC, we know we can't be everything for everyone, but we are working away on a master plan to improve and revitalize the building to serve a really broad range of programming. And you know, similarly to Melanie and to the recent comments that Danny just made, you know, there's also a water cooler effect with a building like CDCC as well, where, you know, groups can host simultaneous events and become aware of each other, inspired by each other, or curious about one another. It's a beautiful thing. And, you know, we're really dedicated to fostering community collaborations. I think that that's a fundamental, important goal of ours right now. And we're really excited about programming ideas that come from university and community user groups. And we try to start making introductions where we see synergies that exist. And it's absolutely thrilling to watch the cross-pollination of groups and to see how they start to share resources. It's really special as well to see how faculty and students from the university start to be able to work alongside or directly with community groups as well. I could certainly talk about this subject for days, but tonight I did think that perhaps I would let some photographs of the amazing groups who are working at CDCC reflect this story more wholesomely. So the first photo that you see here, thanks Emma, is Music and Beyond. It's their summer festival. They brought in an acrobatic group for their opening night, and for their final gala, they actually did a massive collaboration with a bunch of organizations that you see listed here. You know, their efforts were community-wide in their festival this past year. Next slide. The next one is the a beautiful CUAG presentation that was hosted this past year called Tomoni. And it was actually an event where CUAG actually partnered with the Ottawa Japanese Community Association and Cultural Center, and also with the embassy here in Ottawa. This is only one of many events that that beautiful events that they hosted downtown with us. Next slide. This is actually the Ottawa International Writers Festival. They hosted the Republic of Childhood, and this was a really lovely collaboration with actually Carlton's Childhood and Youth Studies program. And they worked with many students. Actually, Jamal, you were part of this program too, if I recall correctly. The Carlton Center for Youth, Urban Youth Research and various schools, the Writers Festival worked with these groups for a lengthy period of time. And it was this particular event that they all came together and were able to present their writings, and it was wonderful. And there was a series actually in a booklet that was created by a group of youth who had experienced homelessness as well in this session as part of the Urban Youth Research Project. Next slide. So the Ottawa Symphony Orchestra, they are a formal partner of ours, and this picture I think just beautifully captures a jam-packed stage with, you know, musicians from the University of Ottawa music program, and you can just see, you know, the potential and, you know, capacity that this space has for a community to really start to come together and share a meaningful experience and escape together. Next slide. This is very specifically, you know, a shot that's been angled off to the side. This is Chamberfest Summer Music Festival. This particular photo is actually representing the sensory-friendly concert that they presented with Xenia Productions. And behind the curtains is actually, they worked with the Lotus Music Center and various organizations throughout the city of Ottawa to bring in folks across the spectrum. And what was so lovely at this particular event is there were students, or not students, young people who were seated on cushions. There were some who were just standing. There were some who were lying down against the wall. Anything went in this concert, and it was fantastic. Next slide. This particular photo, I hope you can see the joy screaming out. This was a holiday term and recital that Orchestra hosted, and they really do great work with a variety of communities across the city. This is their downtown group, and they are completely integrated with schools, with working with organizations that are supporting low socioeconomic situations for families and beyond. Next slide. This is a fun photo. You can actually see the orchestra rehearsing in the background. They just needed a quick photo in the sanctuary, and it just happened to be on a rehearsal day. But this is an opera that was written by a local composer, Andrew Egger, and this opera was actually premiered at Halloween last year. And Carlton Music actually created an entire international symposium where they had folks from around the world that came to run an entire conference, 2-day conference alongside the premiere of this opera. So there was a lot of synergy seen and a lot of sharing to celebrate the anniversary surrounding Frankenstein and the creator's work. Next slide. This is Ottawa Children's Theatre. So this group actually is in every weekend with us. There's on average, there's usually, before COVID, there's 277 youth who are coming through every weekend to join us. This group actually focuses on dramatic arts, and they actually partner with global collaborators. So a lot of folks from Europe, and they bring in examiners to make sure that they can also inspire students to strive towards Trinity drama examinations as well. Next slide. Big Soul Project. This is a holiday tradition for this group typically. This was last year's holiday concert. These folks literally get the entire audience up and dancing and yelling and screaming and singing, and it's a hoot, and it's a really great cause too. So they also partner with local organizations. So this past year it was Ottawa Food Bank, and I think they raised just over $11,000 for that at that particular event for the food bank this year. Next slide. We can't forget our own university groups. So this Carlton Drama Studies program is a really special and interesting program because it actually attracts people from all the different departments. So you will have seen so many collaborations, community with community, community with university, etc. But this one is actually interesting because it's hiring contract instructors from the community, but it's also really targeting different folks from different departments within the university. So there's students from engineering, there are students from the Faculty of Public Affairs. So they're actually coming together because they had a passion for drama and they missed it from their earlier years. So they can actually come and take this course through the English department and relive and expand their minds surrounding their dramatic art interests. And last slide. So this is a beautiful event that was held during Black History Month, facilitated and coordinated by Carlton's social work department. The event was called Imagine, Inspire, and Ignite. And this was just a beautiful day. This is a kind of thing, the epitome for me of what it means to think of art in a community and how we gather. They were engaging young groups, they were engaging senior groups, they were engaging other departments within the university. They were engaging other equitable departments. There were other local organizations that supported Black History events, and they brought all of these groups together and had this fantastic full day affair in the building. So these are just literally just a little morsel of some great photos that I happen to have of our first year in the building, just to showcase, what I meant by collaborations.
Thank you so much, Mara. That's amazing. Obviously, your team is doing a fantastic job of facilitating a challenging and really wide range of events. So one of the things that's interesting to me about CDCC is that it's a venue for events rather than being a co-presenter or a co-producer of them. And I'm wondering how you think about, what groups you decide to work with, what events to present, and kind of what factors and values shape your programming decisions.
Sure. So at this particular time, CDCC may decide in the future to specifically present special concerts or events, or provide more outreach activities in response to local interests. But at this time, it's a real honor for us to be creating a platform. We are a venue where local groups and university groups can come together, find a space that works for their particular event and thrive. It's really about exploration right now for groups and for us. And it's really exciting for us to work behind the scenes. I think our main role right now is to really facilitate and educate how you can create a professional event, how you could use the space most effectively, how you could connect with one another and really help others succeed to showcase the talent.
But interestingly, at the same time, you're also a Carlton facility, and one of the university's primary activities is to facilitate research. So I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you see CDCC facilitating scholarly research. What are some of the opportunities that students might have, and also professors?
Sure. I think that there are perhaps endless possibilities, but you may recall Ellen referred to her new research center, or just earlier this evening, Music, Sound, and Society, and we really hope to play an active role in that particular research work that she will be facilitating alongside many other community groups and many other colleagues at the university. But we're really happy to report that, right away, FASS actually was able to engage a master's student from the history department, to start looking at the history of the building and its people to date, and telling the stories of folks who have, who are part of our history now. And additionally, just this past September through till December, we actually hosted a curatorial studies grad student who was able to really dig into the archives and was able to make 5 amazing episodes to start, telling some of the really unique social stories through an artistic kind of cultural lens of the history of the building. But we have a lot of, we're supporting Carlton Music and English Drama Studies for sure. We have learning and retirement programming that is, they're all focused on curricular activities. But for faculty and students, I'm starting to notice there's a lot of interest to showcase learning, so we're actually provide a platform to present final presentations of research or master's work or graduate doctorate work. And also we are really happy to be sort of an off-campus building for folks to be able to have retreats and really start to look at engagement in a different way that is, not always rooted in the same walls. It can be inspired by all of the activities that are happening simultaneously in the building outside of COVID.
Thank you so much, Mara. It's wonderful. And it segues very nicely into Ellen's presentation, because Ellen is actually presenting on an event that she co-organized at CDCC, which was called the Arts, Health, and Community Showcase, which took place earlier this year, in fact, on March 6th. So Ellen, if you would like to talk about this event, please go ahead.
Thanks a lot. I'm going to start with another quote from Jamal Jackson Rogers' work. He was part of this terrific event. And he wrote us a poem afterwards. Building a healthy community is the artwork of the heart, he says so beautifully. So I hope you don't mind my quoting that, Jamal. But it really speaks to that day for me. So, I'm really new in town and I've just been looking to get involved in things. And in spring 2019, a group of arts, health, and social organizations in Ottawa convened a networking event to share their ideas about the role that the arts play in promoting health and wellness in the city. So that event was sponsored by the National Arts Centre, whose amazing Senior Director, Learning and Community Engagement, Genevieve Simon, understands that a national arts organization in Ottawa is also very much a local organization. A year later, the Arts Health Community Showcase continued that conversation, and that's what I want to talk about tonight. So the showcase was a day-long event featuring workshops, presentations, and performances by artists, art therapists, and representatives from community organizations, hospitals, long-term care centers, and school boards that filled the Carlton Dominion Chalmers Centre, like literally from top to bottom, on March 6th, 2020. It was the last social event I attended before the lockdown. And in retrospect, the photos we snapped that day, like Mara's beautiful record of CDCC events, they're remarkable because they capture that precious, and we realize now not to be taken for granted, experience of sharing space together in community. My Carlton music colleague, Kathy Armstrong, attended that first event in spring 2019, and then she did something really typical for her. She stepped up to see how Carlton could contribute to keeping the conversation going. Kathy, as many of you will know, has a deep history of arts and community engagement in Ottawa through the Baobab Drum Dance Community, an organization she founded and directed for 25 years. She has also taught for Carlton Music throughout that time, and her community spirit has infused our music program. Our first-year students begin their training with an immersion in learning to play West African and South Asian rhythms. These are structures that are complex and cyclical and completely dependent on group cooperation. And this embodied intercultural approach is completely innovative in Canadian music schools. It expansively shapes our students' worldview. So through Kathy, I became involved in the planning group for the Arts Health Community Showcase. And that was a really great gift to a newcomer. So I'm really here reporting as a witness to the remarkable Arts for Wellness activity across Ottawa that was shared that day. A really vital driver of the showcase was Claire Speed, a former National Arts Centre Director of Music Education, who's now an independent arts advisor and advocate for social prescribing. And this was something I had not previously known about. So social prescribing is an idea that was developed in the UK and has been piloted in Ontario over the last few years. So here's how a recent report on that pilot project describes the concept of social prescribing. What does it look like for the healthcare system to see a patient as a whole person instead of focusing on just their medical diagnosis? What if, along with medication, doctors and nurse practitioners were enabled to prescribe dance lessons, cooking classes, volunteer roles, caregiver supports, single-parent groups, and connections to bereavement networks? What if clients were empowered to take control of their own health and co-create solutions? What if primary care centers became places of belonging? Social prescribing recognizes and formalizes then the cultural work that already happens across our communities. Claire Speed understood that there are artists, musicians, dancers, writers, and actors across Ottawa who are delivering these kinds of benefits to people, working in very different contexts, but sharing a common belief that the arts are essential to health and well-being. They also generally share the challenges of working with very limited budgets, precarious employment, and inadequate facilities. And the showcase was a rare opportunity for all kinds of arts, health, wellness workers just to get together and share their work and their ideas, their challenges, and their dreams. As the invitation, or we called it a call to action that we sent out, stated, the Arts, Health, and Community Showcase is an opportunity to share what you do, to learn about others' work, to network, and to engage in dialogue. Share some of what you do in your work as a volunteer or in day-to-day life that brings together any combination of the arts, health, and community. Together, we'll explore the potential of creating a community of practice in Ottawa. Pooling resources was key to producing this free event, which included financial contributions from Carleton's Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, thanks to Associate Dean Anne Bowker, and from the National Arts Centre, thanks to Genevieve Simone. And Mara Brown, that miracle worker, facilitated the important donation of all the spaces and technical setup of all those rooms at CDCC. Now, so far, this sounds like a pretty basic story, right? A bunch of people get together to create a community event. Happens all the time. But I think it's important to underline the fact that nothing happens without resources. I think it's, seemingly simple things like space can be out of reach for many people. And the gift of space, plus a little money and a lot of elbow grease, can create remarkable opportunities. And I'm just echoing Melanie's comments here about space. And space, is one of the most important resources that universities have to share. And I'd love to see universities function as also spaces. Here's a small sampling of my own experience at the Arts Health Community Showcase. Contributing to a collaborative artwork of colored sand and watching it bloom over 8 hours with contributions from dozens of people, and then watching that same beautiful mandala being swept away at the end of the day. A recognition that processes of co-creation and collaboration are where art lives and produces its effects. Jamming with members of the Tournesol Band, an improv rock group with members of L'Arche, Ottawa community who raised the roof of the chapel. Movement exercises with instructors from Propeller Dance on the main stage in the sanctuary. Learning about the amazing work of MASK, Multicultural Arts Schools Communities, a charitable organization that offers over 200 professional artists of diverse backgrounds, offering workshops, performances, artist-in-residence programs, and special events in all artistic disciplines for over 120,000 people a year. And then attending the plenary session on the social prescription movement about a collaboration between the Vanier Social Pediatric Hub, CHIO, University of Ottawa and Carlton University, and the Museum of Nature to provide families with an opportunity to spend a day at the museum, and typically families who might never have found themselves downtown to do that. At the end of the day, a really great, energized day, we all gathered at the parlor, in the parlor at CDCC to talk about the need for greater connection and resource sharing among arts, community, health advocates in the city and beyond. We heard from the experienced members of the Arts Health Network Ottawa and their counterparts in the Arts Health Network Canada, some of whom had made the trip out from Toronto for the day. People like Suzanne Valois, Carmel Whittle, Nancy Solange Dean, Divya Shastri, and Suni Jacob have all worked for many years in their communities to raise awareness of the benefits of arts for health and wellness. Like all community arts advocates, they are subject to the vagaries of public funding priorities and to the flux of human energies. The AHNC and more recently the AHNO took the difficult decision to suspend activities and regroup and reform in a way that will be appropriate for now. So in the midst of celebrating the creative energy and diversity of community arts and their contributions to a healthy city, I also think we need to emphasize the difficulty of sustaining such work. It's mostly volunteer, it requires endless advocacy and fundraising, and the people committing all this time and energy are also trying to make a living and to keep their own artistic programs running. Like many other aspects of society, the pandemic has stretched capacities and exposed structural weaknesses, as well as affording all kinds of interesting opportunities. Above all, it compels us to contemplate a serious question: what do we value? I'll end by quoting that poem from Jamaal Jackson Rogers again. Building a healthy community is the artwork of the heart. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ellen. I don't feel like that my questions are equal to the task of the beautiful words that you just delivered. So maybe I'll just ask you a little bit about the interesting intersection of Carlton and the civic community at this event. Because, we at Carlton often speak of our contribution to community engagement, but we don't often speak about how the community contributes to Carlton. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. Like, how can we ensure that, the university's civic relationships are reciprocal and mutually beneficial, and that Carlton is open to being shaped by community organizations rather than always seeing ourselves as the other way around, really.
Because it's just true, right? It's just always happening. And you know, Danny's description of all the things happening in the gallery is exactly that, isn't it? You know, I want to say that our music program is a great example of this. It could not operate if it didn't have the extraordinary contributions of dozens of local musicians who we hire to teach students how to play a particular instrument or run an ensemble or give workshops or come in and be artists in residence. You know, these things sound like things that Carlton contracts or hires, but another way to look at them is that that's a resource in the community that enables the whole enterprise to happen, right? And we've just developed a new relationship with the Ottawa Symphony Orchestra, which is exactly the kind of thing I think we should be doing, where the orchestra will kind of shepherd some of our students and our students will have opportunities with them. But also the orchestra gets the benefit of having, you know, more people to play with, more interesting projects to come up, and they'll be slightly different probably than the kinds of projects they do with University of Ottawa. It's not a new thing for them, but it's a new relationship for us, and I think it's the kinds of things that we need to be fostering. But it's the attitude, right? It's the attitude. I remember, you know, God help me, I remember when we called it outreach. You know, the idea, this sheer galling, you know, ego of universities thinking that they were reaching out to communities to benefit them in some way. When we are the community, we're part of the community, we're braided with it, and we should think of ourselves as a member of the community, not as an institution that sort of stands apart from it. So I have all kinds of hopes for CDCC, and I love the way Mara's articulating its vision, because that's a precious resource. All that space, people to set up microphones, you know, places for people to gather. Those are things that are really in sharp demand. So universities have a choice when they have shiny new buildings or shiny old buildings. Make them accessible, do the hard work of building all those relationships and keeping that going, or make them shiny, wonderful things that only a few people can access. And Carlton's got a great opportunity there.
Thank you so much, Ellen. And so many of the things that you spoke about segue beautifully into the work of Jamal Jackson Rogers, especially you talked about the gift of space. And Jamal, I think that's one of the things that you offer so much and have developed is the gift of space. So I'll just turn it over to you, Jamal, to speak about the Origin Arts and Community Center.
I was just about to say, don't say it. Don't say I'm muted. Thank you, though. So many things have been said that mirror what I would like to reflect on today. However, thank you for those reminders, and thank you for all the work and the intentional efforts you are putting into making the city an amazing creative space. Yes, as I mentioned, I am the Director of Operations of the Origin Arts and Community Center. What you're going to see is a slideshow of photos of things that have happened and occurred in the space. You'll probably see some photos as well of how we've renovated and built the space over time. And yeah, just shining a little bit of light on the space and what energy occurs inside the Origin. So it was around, I want to take you through just providing the current operations of the studio. So currently, and I would like to include outside of the COVID environment too as well, what we try to do, and what I mean by outside of the COVID is like how we still hope to move forward once COVID passes. We currently run programming for children and youth in the arts. So artistic programs in theater, spoken word, and storytelling that help young creatives explore their voice, find their more authentic voice and or style, and then find opportunities to present their work within Ottawa, the Ottawa creative community. We also just recently launched a sister program here called the Origin District Theatre, which is a theater production company that aims to support racialized communities and helping them to have access to the theater world by helping them with their onstage acting and presence, but also creating theater pieces for the city and community to enjoy. And then we're also a venue, a physical space that you can rent out for whatever type of gathering you want that fits our mission statement, but also fits the space, because we are a 725 square foot space. So we're not a large space at all, which was intentional. So that's our current programming here. I may have missed something, but we run all sorts of events. Anything that can fit in the space and on the stage can happen. Of course, now that COVID is here, we've minimized and we do a lot of live streaming, and it's a rehearsal space as it sits right now. A lot of live streaming for artists who need to get online and perform and present. But mainly it's operating right now as a rehearsal space and as a thinking hub for if you want to come and use the space and craft, create, conceptualize your ideas. So what happened was in 2015, I had finished my most recent artistic retreat in India, and I had already been twice to go to visit India and to facilitate a spoken word retreat. And what ended up happening was, as I was leaving, the two individuals that invited me to lead these retreats, they had asked me if they wanted they had told me actually they wanted to open a school, a performance arts school in India, titled the Jamal Jackson Rogers School of Performing Arts. And I had told them that I wasn't worthy of that type of gift. And I didn't want to feel like a savior for poetic expression within their lands. And I had encouraged them to find somebody who's from there who can represent that. And so they said, okay, they made me make them a promise. They said, okay, when you go back to Canada then, promise us that you'll open your own space. And I told them, I said, listen, I've been to India 7 times now. I know kind of how the economy works a little bit here. With a smaller amount of budget, I can open a space in India, build it from the ground up. But in Canada, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes to build a space, one, but if not rent a space, it's outside of my budget, I said. And they said to me, Jamal, if you want something, you can't speak negatively towards it. You have to speak positively towards it. They said, this is what you do, right? I said, yeah, you're right. So they said, from now on, you're going to have the mantra that you're going to open up your own artistic space in Ottawa. I said, okay. So I repeated that mantra and I literally landed and spoke to an individual named Jackie DeToy. She's a theater practitioner and an actress here in Ottawa. I told her about my trip in India. We were friends. And I told her about that incident, that moment of, clarity when my friends told me that I should pursue opening up a space. And Jackie, coincidentally, had the same intention. She took me around the corner to where she lived. She showed me a venue, and the rest was history. And both of us, in that conversation between Jackie and myself, co-founding the space, we talked about Jackie being from South Africa, myself raised in Guyana, how easy it was for culture and art to be appreciated as part of culture and expression, and how easy it was to find and define spaces in countries that were considered third world or developing countries, and how in Canada there's so much red tape and bureaucracy around creating space, building space. I mean, for people who either don't have deep pockets or don't have maybe, post-secondary education or business acumen and such like that, how difficult it is. But back home, if you have a family, you're guaranteed 7, 8 of them are entrepreneurs, and they could be artists, and they're creating and living. And so we wanted to kind of mimic that, because what we found here is, from myself, is that every time I went to rent a space, every time I went to find out about how to own a space, there was always so much that I found were barriers for me to feeling like I'm going to be liberated rather than walking away from using this space and it's going to be a burden. And we wanted to break down some of those really horrible barriers that caused a lot of people that were coming, like refugees, immigrants, racialized individuals. They want to dive deep into their creative process, and they want to show the city and show their community that they're practicing artists, but they can't afford some of the more expensive and larger institutions. And there's also some access issues, such as like maybe the spaces serve alcohol, or they're the downtown core. So our dream was to open a space that was large enough for you to dream, but small enough for you to be able to access and afford it. And so this is where the Origin Arts and Community Center was birthed. And our main focus is to make sure that nobody, when you come into this space, you feel like you're home, right? From wherever part of the world you come from, whether you're raised here, or if you're raised somewhere overseas, you feel like it's home. Because for us, that sense of always feeling like we're on the fringes, even though, Jackie's an immigrant, and I was born in Toronto, but my whole young life was raised in Guyana. I always felt like my experience here, I was pushed to the fringes, like I didn't belong. And so finding a space of belonging and creating that and cultivating that and letting everybody know that this space is for you was really important to our vision. And so that's the history of the Origin, and kind of our main focus and goal is to break down some of those barriers that cause, especially racialized people, them to feel like the arts is not a practicing effort, or it's not a goal or an aspiration they should have. And oftentimes, even within their own families, it's looked upon, when once families settle here, art is not a viable opportunity and it's not a viable career choice. And as we look around, and sometimes we ask ourselves, who are the career artists? When you look at those lists that say emerging to established to career artists, by the time you get to career artists, the faces all look the same 99% of the time. It looks like Eurocentric, it looks like Caucasian individuals or white individuals that are career artists. Emerging, plenty of racialized, and established, it just gets less as it goes up. So we wanted to be able to promote the idea that you could come from a foreign country, be here, and be even recent, and you can establish yourself as a career artist over time by having access to the arts. And that's kind of like our overall vision. We essentially, what we want to do is decolonize the hierarchy of artistic practice, right? Even within, we know that there's a hierarchy there, right? And it's not specific to quality necessarily, because there is a conversation around what the quality of art that is produced and such. It's more about being able to have the doors open. And this is why at the Origin, our ceiling is all doors. I'll just show you there. It's all doors at the ceiling, because the idea is to know that when you step into this space, you will find yourself and your authentic self, because we offer that type of energy here. So we want to create a community that's inclusive. We want to amplify racialized stories. That's really important for us. But we also want to demonstrate that lowering the bar, because oftentimes in this artistic world of hierarchy and elitism, right? Sometimes lowering the bar is seen as you can't lower the bar in artistic practice, because it'll make everybody think, well, art is just, anything and what you want to express. But I feel like lowering the bar, sometimes you got to lower the bar to raise the bar. So in our space, we have a lot of emerging artists, and we foster and we nurture them, even though they're not at the level yet where they're either ready to share or curate events or be a public performing artist. We invite that idea of lowering the bar in order to raise the bar. But also, something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is, the systems within westernized culture, they weren't necessarily created with racialized communities to be involved historically. Right now we're doing lots of work, and these gatherings are definitely promoting that and pushing in the right direction. But I've been thinking about historically, they weren't made for the sharing of power, and there's so many inequities that we're trying to break down. So I often think about, you can't rely on a system that wasn't designed for your liberation, right? And art is a form of liberation, right? And so when you rely on a system. And I know that the idea is, well, you should be able to rely on a system. But when you look historically at the systems that have been created, they weren't created for Indigenous voices and bodies. They weren't created for Black and BIPOC voices and bodies to thrive. And now we're doing the necessary work by allowing spaces like this, the Origin, like the other spaces that were mentioned earlier, the possible worlds and such, to have, to invite those bodies and those stories. And so this is one of the reasons why we don't, our methods don't necessarily merge with the idea of nonprofit or the idea of, well, we're more leaning towards a social enterprise, but for a long time, we at Origin were reticent of the nonprofit idea, because when you go to see those check boxes, there are all these boxes that were framed, but even the people that made those boxes, they really don't understand the cultural foundations of why people need either funding or, you know, why they need specialized programs that would help nourish their initiatives. So that's pretty much it. We're located in Hindenburg, and we hope that, you know, one day you might find yourself in this space.
Thank you so much, Jamal. That was really inspiring, and yeah, it was wonderful. When we were talking a few weeks ago, you made an interesting comment that has kind of really stuck with me, in which you compared yourself to a stockbroker in the way that you see your role as anticipating changes and shifts in the cultural landscape and kind of responding in kind with the work that you're doing at the Origin, which you've already kind of alluded to. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Right. So being an entrepreneur, creative entrepreneur, and being an artist myself, I know that one day I could be in high demand and the next day not. And artists and creatives and entrepreneurs know this, right? And so given that the work that I do for the communities that I'm engaged with and that I serve, I want to be able to be ahead of the curve when things are not working too well. So a stockbroker is always looking at how the stock market works and being able to almost predict, you know, when to cash out, right, or when to invest. And so for myself, I really believe in like setting a template and creating somewhat of a blueprint, because my biggest goal, my biggest vision is to just have more people be artists, right, and dive in and be professional artists and have hope that they can achieve that. And so I often have to think about, okay, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what is the community going to need? What is the community going to want and be asking for? And so, you know, it started with kind of being an organizer for different poetry events. But when I noticed that the poetry world, especially the slam poetry world, was becoming heavily politicized, and I think that's, you know, natural. It's just, you know, we're in a heavily politicized world right now. When I noticed that happening, what I started to understand was that there are going to be people looking for spaces that had policy that reflected the politics of the time, but at the same time, there was still some space where you can be your authentic self. And so this is one of the reasons why I did think, I had always thought about opening the Origin Arts and Community Center, like a space like this, but I just never thought I could afford it because of how the economy works here, right? And so being able to just say, okay, 5 years from now, where's the artistic community going to be? What are they going to be looking for and asking is really important. It helps me to continue to serve, because you know, I think we're at we're reaching a higher level of existence when individuals can think about how they can better serve their neighbors, right? And so that's all I really mean by shifting and looking at it, the arts community from you know, stock market perspective. What is next? Instead of responding, be what's the term? It's a preventative, almost, you know, but being you know, ahead of the curve, I would say again, responsive, not in a way that we're just waiting for things to happen. We're actually prepared and ready for things to happen, and we're shaping it in the way we want to as well too.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how the Black Rhino Artist Retreat fits into that vision, or how you're anticipating the changes, or what you want to see, like creating the community that you want to see?
So with the Black Rhino Artist Retreat, again, it's an idea I had for a while. It came from being invited to do international retreats and lead those retreats. And for me, I know that there's not anything like that in this city that is offered in a way that's continuous, right? There's no continuity. And sometimes that happens. And again, it's because it's not just the institutions that hold up a level of, certain like of hierarchy and elitism, but it's also the fact that art is not synonymous with Ottawa for some people, not for me, but for some people, right? For many, probably. And so but I know different. And so what I decided to do was think, okay, 5 years from now, as the artistic and the creative community grows and recognizes its worth and value, what are some of the things that creatives are going to want? More space, right? But they also want space that is distant and that allows them to truly explore. And so I've seen, the different hubs that are opening up, amazing hubs that are opening up, but I didn't notice a retreat happening. So I just told myself, why not do something here? And I ran a retreat in 2017. At my home. It was very successful, more successful than I thought it would be. And then I said, okay, it's possible to do this. Let's just go for
it. And so can you tell us a little bit about what happens at the retreat, or what it entails?
So the retreat would entail the ability to escape, create, and showcase. So we want to offer a space where you can get away from the rush of the city and your own schedule and routine, and relax, I guess, rejuvenate yourself through some of the amenities that are offered there, like a bed and breakfast, but also to work on that project that you haven't had time to, right? So if you can carve out some of that space, we want to give you, like, not just, you can stay in your home and do that, of course, and take a staycation, but if you can get that 40 minutes, 45 minutes outside the city, why not? And many creatives do that. And, I look to the countries that have phenomenal artistic communities and the economy works well with the arts. America, as we know, bigger, better, faster. There, everything is, so much grander, it seems, in America. So I look to them, but I also look to Europe, and I've often, especially with the retreats that I've gone to, I've often found that the value there and how they go about supporting the artistic communities are different, and they offer things like retreats and such, and they're for season, and it's small families deciding to do this. And so I've used some of that inspiration from my travels to say, what, I should bring these ideals back to Ottawa if I can, and see what sticks, right? And yeah.
Thank you so much, Jamal. I think maybe we'll just, I thought maybe we just wrap up by asking the artists on the panel, Melanie, Jamal, and Ellen, to maybe speak about very briefly how the work that you do feeds your own practice as an artist. Melanie, do you have any thoughts on that topic?
Sure. So yeah, I work a lot in different communities in Ottawa. And usually a lot of the times I go to the site, to the actual community site. So I've had the opportunity to go to Kittigan-ZB, to go up to Nunavut, and different parts of the world as well during workshops. But in Ottawa, I find, it's my home. So it's been a real treat to be able to learn from the different communities I've interacted with. So just learning about their context, their neighborhoods where they live, has been really special. So for example, through Arts Network Ottawa, I was a neighborhood Arts Ottawa resident last year, and I had the opportunity to go to the different community centers and health centers and work with youth on exploring what neighborhood means to them in Ottawa. And that was a really cool experience, just to see it through their eyes. And it was mainly racialized youth. So just to see sort of, what they were experiencing, how they would shape their neighborhood if they could do it as a youth. Just interesting things like reducing noise, like more playgrounds, more gathering spaces, kind of things that we would want, just fun gathering spaces, public spaces to meet up. So I learn a lot when I go to these community sites. We think sometimes, oh, we're going to go in and teach them how to do music or silkscreen. But in the end, I think we end up learning more. and just learning about their experiences has really helped me to be more compassionate and sympathize or empathize with the different types of communities in Ottawa.
Thank you, Melanie. Ellen, you haven't mentioned this, but you're a flutist, specializing in improvisation. And I'm wondering, does the work that you do outside that sphere affect your work as a musician?
Oh yeah, sure. I was just sitting here thinking I just really want to jam with Melanie and Jamal and Danny and Mara. I just think
you are doing that right now, Ellen.
I guess my practice is in free improvisation, which means that it's largely unstructured, and you go into the situation with your ears, and the whole practice is based on listening, right? Listening and then responding, but it's not made up out of nothing, right? You're always carrying your narratives, your histories, your dramas, your joy, and those. So is everybody else in that situation. So I guess I'm interested in situations where people come together to. I love this word, be your authentic self. You know, this that where you can come together and negotiate space and time and across difference, especially, right? For me, the most beautiful personal moment of the Arts Community Health Showcase was the Turn a Soul band. These just amazing musicians from a L'Arche home working with Rory McGill, who are just, man, these guys, they just were no holds barred. Like there was no fear in their music making, and I felt like I could play with those guys, right? I felt that the strange, weird sounds that I make were instantly recognizable among that band, and that's what I live for, is just those moments of recognition, right, where you can connect, even though you might have very different languages or different backgrounds or different hang-ups of various sorts. So that, I mean, I guess the impulse is the same, like the impulse to connect is the same.
Jamal, any final words on how your work at the Origin affects your own practice?
I feel like just today I was thinking about the idea. I've been doing everything online now, so my performances, my workshops and such, and I realized I fell back in love with the workshops. I've been workshopping for a very long time now and doing art workshops, and today, after a launch of a program that I'm working on, I realized how important workshops are as compared to performing, and this space, the Origin, because the Origin is a gathering space, and more, I think what's occurred here more than anything else is workshops and meetings than performances, because performances, just doing them all the time and such and inviting people, it's not a thing. It's not like a bar. We're in a dry space. So, but what I realized was that when you create a space where people can explore, just like in my workshops, I'm essentially creating a space where people can explore either through writing or performance. When you do that, it's not so much about me anymore being a performer and being able to impress upon an audience my work, hoping that they can engage with it after I'm finished. What it's really about is when you're a workshop artist or you create space, it's about people finding themselves. And I realized today, I really don't know if there's anything more empowering for me or rewarding than helping people find themselves, right, in this lifetime that they experience. And so that's what this space does for me and fosters and nurtures with me as a creative. As I said, I kind of like felt like I'm burnt out when it comes to workshops, but today reinvigorated it because I realized, you know, when I perform, there's this hope that I've impressed people enough so that they can engage with my work later. But when I offer space, the impression now is, well, did you find something about yourself and discover something about yourself that you can use for your lifetime? And that's what's how this space feeds me.
Thank you so much, Jamal. And I think that's a beautiful and perfect note to end this conversation on tonight. So I want to thank each and every one of you, Danny and Mara and Ellen and Jamal and Melanie, for your really generous, kind and honest and open and wonderful participation. It's been really a pleasure to speak with you all, and thank you so much for your contributions. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. So have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
And thank you to Sandra for moderating and bringing
My
it together.
pleasure. Honestly, it was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.